Guys. You should be good.
Are we recording?
Mhm.
All right. Let's open the meeting. Today is, I can't read that date. All right, the 6th of March, time is 6:03. You're starting a few minutes late. All right, today is a meeting where we're going to do some interviewing of candidates for our council positions. We'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag States. All right, Ms. Johnson, will you call roll call, please?
Yeah, Mayor Hibben,
Here.
Councilmember Bryan, Councilmember Glazer,
Here.
Councilmember Rainville.
Present.
Consultant Boyles,
Here.
Administrative Assistant Johnson. Here. And your interim city administrator is here.
All right.
Roll call is taken.
Thank you very much. We move on to, I just got a couple key points I wanted to discuss. And what I told the city, as we've been talking about, is that I would not do an appointment process. We would go through a process and we would go through 3 rounds. So I will not be appointing tonight. That's not the intent at all. I will not be appointing. So I want to just make sure that's clear. If there's motions that go forward, it will be a majority rule and majority only. So no appointments. Okay. With that stated, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Boyles.
Just a couple of words. Backwards, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Red, green, red, green. I'm red, green colorblind, and I always miss it. I apologize. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I have nothing to do with the decision-making process up here. They've simply put me up here so you can hear my comments, hopefully, and I can come in and do some work that's helpful for the city. I have about 50 years in local government. That's good or bad, depending on your perspective. I've worked with in excess of 20 different council members, 10 different mayors. And the reason I bring that up is because in the local government system, right there is the miracle. It's people, and that's what we're doing tonight, trying to select a new miracle, if you will. These are people who decide to provide their service to their community as opposed to necessarily their service to themselves. And we should all be very, very grateful for that. So thank you guys for the work you do. And thanks to our originally 7 candidates who expressed an interest in serving this city council role. This is an open meeting. Oftentimes you'll see meetings that take place on a closed basis. This is an open meeting, as you can see. But that being said, it's not a football game. It's not an athletic event. So the idea is not to show one's perspective one way or the other, cheering or booing. Literally, I've been in meetings where that sort of thing has happened. If a candidate, your candidate is not appointed tonight, what is the appropriate way to deal with it? I'd go to my council members. This is a representative form of government. I'd say, well, gee whiz, you missed the person, or good job. You've got the right person in mind. And they understand what that is about. A drawing will determine the order of the 3 remaining candidates we have. We had 2 candidates 4 candidates? Yes, okay. We had candidates that had to leave town early. We actually put them through the interview process. You will hear from them as the last 2 interviewed candidates. Today, 1 candidate dropped out, felt it wasn't the right mix for him. And so now we are down to 6. I see. Okay. So it's the 2 at the end plus those that remain. We will take the applicants prior to their interview back into the lunchroom. And the purpose, of course, is to try and not have anyone have undue advantage by having been able to hear the question and think through what their answer might be. Trying to keep things here on an even keel for each person. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each of the questions. Overall, there are 8 questions. Council members will be doing 2 questions each. But again, it's in an order that we predetermined. The council at the end will then just determine where each candidate is on their list and take whatever appropriate action might be for that time. As you've heard, the mayor has the authority to unilaterally make the decision, but he has said he will not do that. Not just this time, not the second time, not even the third time, but the fourth, if the council is just unable to make any kind of decision together, then he will reserve that power, which he has the right to. The person who is appointed, we will try and get them to take their oath as quickly as possible. As we do, we're very anxious to get the council with 5 persons as it was intended to be. If no one is appointed, each council member might share their 4th, 5th, and 6th rankings and see if the number of candidates can be revised or reduced in hopes that will make the decision-making easier for future meetings. Mayor, members of the council, that's the background as I understand. If there's anything I've missed, please feel free to cover that.
Want to just talk the time they have available for each question?
Sure.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, you bet. We talk about having 2 minutes for each question. I know that's difficult to do because they're coming at you and you've never seen the question before, but I'm confident you'll be able to respond to that. When there's 15 seconds left in your response to any question, Natalie what will you do? Wave. Okay, good. To try and let you know you're time to wrap it up in that perspective. Other comments, Mayor, members of the council?
Nope, I think you've covered it all.
Okay.
So at this time, Lexi's gonna be our chair, is like taking off and going. It's coming to see you, Ken. She's gonna select the candidates, so we'll know the order. First one you select will be first up, followed by the second one will be the second one up. Second, third, and fourth candidate will all go into the kitchen area.
All right, first candidate is Paul Reighard. Second candidate is Don Phillips. Going third is Dan Swenson. And fourth will be Sue Schmit.
And Frank, you were gonna go in the kitchen with them?
I'm gonna take.
Okay. Paul, how do we pronounce your last name? Reighard. I would have got it incorrect. Reighard.
Well, everybody.
Reighard.
We're in that table.
All right, now we're gonna read your names real quick.
And then you want to make sure that you get.
The green light is on.
Green light is
Alright.
on.
So I guess we didn't talk about questions yet, and I should do that real quick. So when we go to ask questions, just for our council members, the order, I wrote them down.
Mayor and then alphabetical order.
So we're all gonna ask the same question, so I'll take question 1, followed by Councilmember Bryan, followed by Councilmember Glazer, followed by Councilmember Rainville. And then when we go to the second page, we'll do the same order of march. So we all have the same exact questions for each and every one. All right, are we ready for Paul to get started? All right, sir, it's up to you. First question, what inspired you to apply for the city council opening?
So I understand the position that we're in currently, with one member short. And I come in with, I've actually served on the council before. So I come in with experience, and being that this is kind of a short interim position until my understanding is the city has a special election. I thought coming in, that experience and knowledge would be able to help the council, especially with a couple new members on the council, being familiar with the policies, the process, and all that moving forward. And again, I've served before. I was on a park and rec committee years ago as well, and that's how I kind of got involved in doing it. There's a lot of things going on in the city that I think need to be addressed, and like to be a part of that decision-making process.
Waiting for pens to move, stop moving.
I'm good. I got all my keynotes on that one. Thank you.
Are there any issues that you can think of that would be a conflict of interest?
Not really. I guess the only issue that I potentially could see is I've been a member of the fire department for 15 years. So if there's votes or decisions potentially with something regarding the fire department, I don't know if that would be considered a conflict of interest or not, but that would be the only one.
I don't know that would be a conflict of interest.
I'm not sure either.
I don't know.
Well, city strategic plan, because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and even 20 years. Tell us about your experience in strategic planning.
So again, I've had experience being on the council before, so I've dealt with a lot of this stuff before, but also in industry. I'm in an industry that has a lot of strategic planning based on, it's a mill aero industry. So depending on how the market generates and fluctuates, we have to obviously always be evolving with how that market goes. If you go back to the city level, obviously things to look at is, budgets, how things, how equipment costs are going to change from year to year. Does it make sense to acquire equipment, now or wait, depending on interest rates, and how the things like funding or grants and those kind of things. So there's a big part of it that always fluctuates, that you always have to be evolving with that.
Mayor, can I follow up? It is the same question. Can you tell me how long will the city council? That's not all.
No, but I think we got to hold that. I think that would possibly come back around too. We got to ask the exact questions to everybody, and I don't think it'd be fair to add any. Councilmember Rainville.
To Paul, how important is public engagement in the city decision-making process?
Well, it's important, I've always said, you try to please as many people as you can, but you're never going to be able to please everybody. So you have to be involved to try to understand what people want within the city. And again, I've been involved with the city, with the fire department for a long time. I've been involved with the city with Park and Rec Committee, again, being on the council prior, but knowing and understanding what the residents or the majority of the residents want is very important. So being involved from that aspect, I think is, again, truly means a big difference. You look at Facebook right now and there's a lot of talk periodically about taxes and what tax increases are. I think one thing that the city hasn't done real well is plan for the future. and try to budget for the future. And I think that's what we're seeing today is we're trying to make up for some of that. So it's difficult. You guys are in a very difficult situation with the cost of infrastructure going up and the tax revenue coming in and not any continued growth that the city sees, either business or residential.
All right, next question, Paul. How important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of the different stakeholders?
And again, that's kind of goes along with what I just mentioned prior was, I've always, I've served on other boards and other committees and whatnot, and I've learned through the years, you're never going to appease everybody. So you have to use your best judgment to do, number one, what's best for the city and all the other stakeholders involved. And you also have to go into it, I believe, with an open mind. I may have a firm thought on what I think is right, but with having an open mind and listening to others and hearing their arguments, they hopefully or can persuade you, that your original way of thinking was maybe not the best way.
Thank you.
What are your top priorities to accomplish if appointed?
So right now, again, my understanding that it's an interim position, so it's not a real long position, which is fine. There are key elements I believe that the city needs to address right away, obviously, is the city administration position. Where or what and how does the city plan to fulfill that position? Is it finding, somebody from outside? Is it filling within? What is it? That's obviously something very key to the city right now. You go to the fire department, we have an interim chief, what does that look like moving forward? And some of the other things that I personally would like to see is, and I think the mayor had mentioned it in a previous meeting, was looking at the potential of bringing other committees back to the city and getting more residents and more people involved in some of the decision-making process. In the past, our prior committees were never committees that could actually make that final decisions, but they were residents who could offer suggestions and recommendations to the council of what others wanted to see within the city. The council can't talk to everybody and can't fully understand exactly what everybody wants or what everybody wants to see in certain avenues. So those other committees, in my opinion, do that, and then they bring that to the council to discuss.
How do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
And again, it's a tough decision because what project deserves money and what one doesn't. Again, I look at it from a perspective of what can the city do or what can the council decide that will impact the most residents in the best way. Some residents aren't going to be happy with those decisions. Some will. But again, I believe you have to look at it from the perspective of, as a council, what does the council believe will impact the city the greatest, get the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, but try to satisfy as many residents as you can. And again, you're not going to be able to satisfy them all.
Councilmember Rainville?
Right, to Paul, city council chooses, excuse me, city council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
Can you repeat that question, Mary? Kind of.
Yes, I will. I'm sorry.
Yes,
ci-
I'm sorry. Yep.
City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
I don't know if I have a specific example, but again, it comes kind of back to what I was saying before is, in my opinion, you have to look at the city as a whole and what priority or what project you believe is going to impact the city in the most positive way or the best, and how that decision can impact, as many residents as possible. There's road projects, that come up and it's how does the city fund them? Traditionally, years past, it was 100% assessments. Then it was changed to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's still city pays 50%, residents pay the other 50s. Are there other ways, so you have to look at it, for example, with that kind of project is what impact and what road project is going to have the most impact. How does it affect those people who are actually funding it versus those people who don't? So it's kind of checks and balances and trying to figure out, again, who benefits the most from what you're trying to do with the city funds. That's it.
All right, Paul, so we've got all 8 questions answered at this point. I would love to open it up for questions, but we can't. We're gonna just keep it to the exact 8 questions for everybody, but thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
We're gonna ask the 8 questions, we'll put all to be around questions. Put out first question. What inspired you to apply for the city council?
I decided that, I had decided once before I had wanted to run for council, just be part of the council and try and learn, get experience out of being a council member, just working for the community. I guess this is brand new to me. I've never done this before, and politics wasn't exactly high on my list, but I guess I thought that I work at the recycle center, and I enjoy the people that work right now up in the office, and I like doing what I do, and thought it would be nice to get involved.
Thank you.
Are there any issues that you can think of that would be a conflict of interest for you?
Pardon?
Are there any issues you can think of that would be a conflict of interest for you?
I don't believe so. I guess not having the experience, I don't know of any issues at this point that I would have.
John? City strategic plan because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and even 20 years. Tell us about experience you've had with strategic planning.
Say that again. I have, this year is plugged, I guess. I'm sorry. I have a hard time.
It's okay. City strategic plan because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and even 20 years. Tell us about your experience in strategic planning.
I had worked for commercial industrial fan company for 50+ years. I spent a lot of those years supervising. Had to work out, planning budget, planning projects for the employees, and work with not only vendors but customers. So that basically, I mean, that's the experience I've had with that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and I enjoyed what I was doing. So, and I got along pretty much, I believe I got along with everybody. So.
Thank you.
So Don, my question is, how important is public engagement in the city decision-making process?
I believe public engagement, I believe, is critical. I mean, the council works for the public or for the residents, and I believe that the council needs to understand the residents' needs. They need to be able to work things out with them without a lot of controversy, a lot of issues, and each needs to understand one over the other. You need to understand what the resident is asking and what they want, and they also need to know what the council is able to do.
Hey, Don, how important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of the stakeholders let me reread this, I messed it up. How important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of different stakeholders?
Yes, I'm not sure I understand that one.
All right, I'll just read it again for clarification. How important is it to you to balance your position, if you were elected as a council person, with the desires of the different stakeholders?
I'm sorry, I guess I'm not sure I understand how.
A better way to clarify that? Maybe I can ask it like this and say, as similar to the last question, the residents are your stakeholders. You might have businesses as stakeholders. How important it is for you to balance the position of the council person with the different stakeholders? How would you handle that?
I guess I would say that it's very important that if I was a council member, would want to be able to understand, work with the resident. And I'm assuming you're talking the stakeholders, the resident, and my goal would be that the resident needs to understand what the city has to go through, but I, as a council member, would want to understand what their needs are, what they're asking of us, and make sure that they understand codes, ordinances, and everything that the city has to go through, the budget, taxes, and so on, and be very transparent with the resident.
Thank you.
What would you say, what are your top priorities to accomplish if appointed?
My top priority for what?
What are your top priorities if you're appointed?
My top priority would be to try to understand what why taxes, why they're where they're at, how budgeting is done, how the numbers come up in the budgeting. I know that there's a lot involved. I guess those are the probably the priority would be understanding taxes and how the budget's developed. How, you know, how a person can, reduce the budget if that's at all possible. Determine what, you know, what's, the city has to, you know, put that money into.
Thanks.
Don, how do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
I guess that's one of the issues, you know, when it comes to taxes. I'm not a lover of taxes, I'll be honest with you, but I mean, you know, in working in a recycle there, a lot of people have brought up this issue with hearing about a tax increase. And you know, my feedback is that, you know, costs go up. And in order for us to maintain, you know, the services the city provides, you know, there's going to have to be, the costs have to come from somewhere. And so taxes may need to go up. The other thing is, you know, maybe development within the city. But, you know, personally, you want, you know, we want a surplus. We don't want to be in debt. So it's, you know, trying to get some people to understand that, it's a little difficult, but they, you know, you know, you talk to them, they, you know, they listen.
Thank you.
You ready? Right. So Don, this is a two-parter. City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
So can you repeat that again?
Yes. City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them. Between them.
That's a tough one. I guess it depends on what the situation is. I would have to look into research and you know, I guess learn what it is. But you know, any priorities, I mean, I would try and initiate something with the council if I thought something was more important than something else that they had on their plate. But you know, I'd be, you know, willing to work with whatever it takes to get whatever has to be done.
Hey, Don, thank you very much for answering the questions. I'd love to ask more questions of you and do an open forum, but we're all sticking to just these 8 questions for tonight. Thank you, sir, for your time. Right there, that's your spot. Hey, Dan, thanks for coming out tonight. We're gonna ask 8 questions. Just got to get to them. We'll do it in a round robin format. So she can find the questions, and I'll start off with the first one. What inspired you to apply for the city council opening?
Well, I've always been, I guess, I don't know, civic minded. I've always wanted to be involved in some sort of local politics. I have no desire to be some bigger politician. I just want to be involved in my community, whether it's through, city council like this or other activities through my kids' schools or sports, or, I've looked at applying for the Lions Club, different stuff. So I want to get out there. And at this point in my life, I feel like my skill level is at a point where I could actually have a good contribution. I feel like I could have a good impact. You know, I have life experience, I have education. And I just feel like I don't know, I just feel capable of doing it now, whereas maybe 10 years ago, you know, I wasn't quite there. I didn't have the confidence, certainly didn't have the free time. And now I do, you know, I'm sort of settled into my career. My kids are getting older, and it feels time. Like I feel like I could have a positive impact here. I don't have any one, you know, individual thing I feel, you know, super passionate about. I don't have like one motivation for getting onto the council to make some specific change. I think I could contribute in a positive way, and that's what I'm looking to do, I guess.
Thank you.
Are there any issues that you can think of that would be a conflict of interest to you?
No, I don't think there are any issues that would be a conflict of interest to me. And I guess let me follow that up with a question. Are you saying like, if I were on the council making decisions or doing whatever council people do, could I see a conflict of interest arising on one of those issues? Is that sort of what you're asking?
The question's kind of it is what it is.
All right, gotcha.
If in what you're doing, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't think I have any conflicts of interest. Like I said, I don't have any one, you know, burning passion, you know, project or issue where I'm coming in here because I want my street fixed or something, and I'm going to come in here and only focus on that and forget everything else. So I don't have that. I just have a desire to help out generally here. You know, when I hear conflict of interest, I'm a lawyer, so I'm thinking like legal conflict. And so that's immediately where my mind went. So I was trying to think of legal conflicts of interest, but none of those exist either. But ethically, no, I can't think of any ethical conflicts of interest either. I guess, you know, well, let me back that up. The one conflict I could see, I guess, and this is just people in general, I think, you know, I'm younger than some people and I have younger kids that are still in school. So I might feel a certain way about, you know, issues with relation to that, as opposed to like a retired person. And now then, you know, they might feel differently on that certain subject. So I wouldn't call that a conflict of interest so much as a different view. And so I guess, you know, just to throw something out there, if anything, it would be something like that. But I don't have any one, you know, burning issue that I think is going to be, you know, create some sort of conflict of interest.
Dan, city strategic plan because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and even 20 years. Tell us about your experience with strategic planning.
Well, I think anyone just in their life in general has experience with a strategic plan. I mean, most people don't go through life just sort of blindly hoping, you know, something changes or happens. And so, you know, just generally in my life, my plan of you know, going through law school and becoming a lawyer, you know, there is strategic planning in that, certainly, you know, sort of a long payoff. But then in my job as an attorney, you know, we have quite a few cases, and some of these cases take a number of years. And so, I mean, it really does require sort of strategic planning in those cases, you know, the things that occur, you know, what you want to occur first, what needs to get done in what order in order to, you know, move the case along. And so I do think I have experience in strategic planning through my job and just through life in general. I guess that's not super specific as it would apply to, you know, a strategic long-term plan in the city, or for the city, that is. But, you know, I think it's sort of the same concept. You know, you got to think both short and long. You know, what is the immediate payoff and what's the immediate need? But also, you know, don't forget about that long game, 20 years out. How is this decision now going to impact X 20 years from now? And so I mean, I do think I do think like that. You know, I try to think through things and try to figure out what both the short-term and long-term impacts are going to be of these decisions and sort of weigh it appropriately.
Thank you.
I don't know if she heard you.
Are you ready?
No?
I was just, Dan was still,
Yes, yes, ma'am.
all right. Dan was still writing. All right. So Mr. Swenson, how important is public engagement in the city decision-making process?
I think it's very important. I mean, you know, a city, I mean, what is a city? It's just a collection of residents who sort of organize together. And so it's not some independent entity lording over, you know, its citizens. I think public engagement is extremely important, especially at this level of politics. You know, public engagement is maybe a little less effective or I don't know, less directly guiding in a bigger setting, such as like a whole state or a nation, obviously. But something this small, I think certainly that with fewer than 5,000 residents, that we should be engaging with the public and getting their input and, you know, seeing exactly, you know, what is it that the citizens want to happen. And that's largely how I see myself operating if I do make it onto the council. You know, like I said, I'm not coming in here with a bunch of pre-decided issues. You know, I would like to hear what's going on, what needs to be worked on, what decisions there are to be made. Then I would engage the public and seeing how they feel about it. Because I'm not trying to impose my will onto a city. I'm trying to have the citizens' will, I guess, guide the city essentially, and I'm just essentially a conduit through through which their will is made, I guess. And so, yeah, I think it's very important, city or public engagement.
Give it a minute for everybody to finish writing.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, Dan, I get the next question. How important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of the different stakeholders?
To balance, can you repeat that one more time?
Absolutely. How important is it to you to balance your position as a council member with the desires of the different stakeholders?
Well, I feel like that's sort of similar to the question I just answered. Maybe I misanswered it, but I would definitely try to consider other stakeholders' interests and viewpoints, and you know, use those viewpoints of those stakeholders in sort of guiding my decision making, I guess. I mean, again, I'm not pretending I have all the answers or know all the issues. You know, I'm essentially just sort of view myself as maybe having just the capability to be sort of a problem solver, you know, something to that effect. And so I guess I mean, I would certainly listen to the other stakeholders' positions, and I would weigh those, you know, just as heavily as I weigh the thoughts in my own head, because I'm never going to assume that I am right and everybody else is wrong. Certainly, because pretty much everyone else can have more experience than me. If by stakeholders, you know, you are referring to my counterparts or the citizens or the employees of the city. And now then, you know, there's many different types of stakeholders in the city. And so, yeah, I think I would weigh, you know, their viewpoints, you know, just as heavily as as mine. And I would take those and I guess revising and crafting my viewpoint on an issue.
Good, thank you.
All right, next question. What are your top priorities to accomplish if you were appointed?
If I was appointed to the city council, my top priority would really just be to be an asset to the council. You know, I want to, I would want to come in and aid and assist in problem solving and sort of creative thinking, discussing through issues. I think that's a strong point that I have through my job, is sort of creative problem solving. And so I think my main priority would just be sort of participating and helping foster just like a civil city council that's representative of its citizens, and make sure that it's actually representative of the citizens and there's not, you know, many fights going on in the council. My second priority would be just generally to keep Nowthen like the way it is. You know, I think everyone who lives in Nowthen or has moved to Nowthen has moved here due to its rural character. And so I think probably every person you interview tonight is probably going to say something to that effect, because it's true. You know, we want it to maintain its rural character, but at the same time, you know, we need to keep up with real life with, you know, other developing cities, you know, and so we need to keep up with the advancements and make sure that we're growing so that we have, you know, additional entities and businesses paying taxes to hopefully lower the tax burden on the rest of us, sort of spread it around there. And so I think that's probably my second priority, is helping Nowthen keep its character, while at the same time keep moving forward. My third priority probably would be, all right, I'm almost out of time. Third priority, let's call it, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm sort of an open book. I really don't have very, very strongly held issues that are specific to a councilman's job.
It's the first person that's hit time so far tonight.
How do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
Yeah, so I think this is a really tough issue, because I think, you know, just like with the keeping the nature of Nowthen, probably another thing that probably every person interviewing up here is saying and feels is that nobody wants higher taxes. And so, you know, it's weighing the needs of the city against, you know, we need to keep up with modern day, keep the city moving forward. But we don't want to have to raise up taxes so much that it's costing everyone an arm and a leg. Can I have you repeat the question?
Sure.
Sure. How do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
Yeah. So the needs of the city, when I hear that, I hear needs of the citizens. I mean, needs of the city, what is that? Like a shiny new office, a better truck for, you know, whoever to drive around? No, it's the needs of the citizens. And so whatever it is that the citizens need, I think that's what we're discussing here. And there's always going to be a cost to that. And, you know, the goal is to keep that cost down. But, you know, it's an issue. You know, I don't think anyone can guarantee that spending or costs are not going to be a problem, that they're going to create some genius way to lower taxes and have, you know, super awesome stuff happen in the city and all sorts of, you know, new technology or new services. I mean, it's definitely balancing act, and it's just sort of finding that balance, just like the keeping the nature of ruralness versus urbanization. You just got to find that balance and make sure it reflects the will of most of the citizens, hopefully.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Councilman Rainville.
All right, thank you. City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
Yeah, so prioritization, obviously, people are gonna have different ideas on different priorities. And like I said, you know, my goal would be to reflect what the citizens are feeling, but that also is gonna be impossible because all citizens are gonna have different balancing of priorities. And so it really just is a matter of I don't think you necessarily have to rank priorities. I think you can, you know, sort of set them next to each other and work on them. I mean, sometimes you have to focus on one more than another, and sometimes it is a decision on one versus another. But I think there's room to sort of consider it all and not take a super, I guess, dug in position on a priority. As far as like a concrete example from my history, if that's what you're asking. You know, I have to prioritize and have work against competing priorities all the time. You know, I think anyone who has a job does that. In my law firm, we have competing priorities. You know, I have my staff and then I have my firm above me. And so I have this competing priority of you know, making my firm happy, keeping my staff happy, keeping my clients happy, you know, making sure I have the resources that I need to do my job. And so there's definitely competing priorities there that you have to think through. You have to have, you know, the ability to, I guess, empathize with the other position and actually put yourself in their shoes and think through it, because it's so easy just to dismiss it because it's not important to you. But I think if you do have that ability to empathize and think of it from their perspective, that, you know, it enables you to have a more constructive conversation on priorities, I think.
All right, Dan, we'd love to ask more questions, but we're going to stick to the 8. All right. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Evening.
Good evening. So we're gonna ask you 8 questions in total. It'll be a round robin type approach. So I'll start with the first one. What inspired you to apply for the city council opening?
Mr. Mayor, I love the city of Alvin. I think it's really important for the citizens to get involved in what's going on. And I figured that I would be a really good fit. I care a lot about the city. I know a lot of people in the city. I participate in a lot of different events and organizations in the city. And so I figured that that would be a good thing for me to do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next question, Sue. Are there any issues that you can think of that would be a conflict of interest to you?
Not that I can think of. I don't have an agenda of my own, so I don't think so. I think that whatever works out best for the city and the citizens and is in the best interest of the city would be what I would be most interested in, and nothing of my own personal agenda.
Thanks.
Sue, city strategic plan, because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and 20 years. Tell us about your experience in strategic planning.
I can think of two examples. My husband and I owned a towing company for 39 years and we had 37 employees. And we were quite large, and every year we had to come up with a plan for the next year, the next year, the next year, what would be in the best interest of the company and for our future and for the employees. And my second example would be with my husband and I both being retired. We are definitely involved in strategic planning every day with our future, our finances, our kids, and just planning for the future in every aspect of our life.
Thank you.
Sue, how important is public engagement in the city decision-making process? Decision-making process.
I believe that it's very important, but I also think that the whole picture needs to be taken into account. So obviously what the city of Now Then and the people of Now Then want sometimes may be different. And I think you need to work with both sides, engage the community, find out what they want, what their needs are. I guess I would like to be in my position, if I am appointed, kind of maybe a bridge between the council and the citizens in the community, so we can all work together for the end goal.
There we go. Okay, next question, Sue. How important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of different stakeholders? So the position of the city, say you were appointed to the city council, with your position, the city council, I'm going to reread the question. How important it is to you to balance your position with the desires of different stakeholders?
Oh, I'm assuming when we're talking about stakeholders, we're talking about city staff, other council members, the businesses in Now Then, the citizens of Now Then. And I again, I would revert back to, I think that it's important to work with everybody and to try to have a bridge between all the different entities and all the different stakeholders in each and every situation. And so I think that, you know, learning what each party wants and what each party's needs are and what the actual reality is, and trying to put that all together and make it work.
So what would you say, what are your top priorities to accomplish if you were appointed?
I have a large desire to keep Now Then simple and kind of rural, and which is why I assume that most of us live here. My husband and I grew up in South Minneapolis and have lived in big cities and worked in big cities. And as we got older, we just kept moving further out because we wanted more of the simplistic lifestyle. I think that, you know, providing amenities to the citizens while keeping within a reasonable budget would be important. I understand that there are times when raising taxes is needed to provide different services and different things, but I would like to have that be done in a very deliberate and conscientious way, so we're not just randomly throwing money out there.
How do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
I think I kind of referred to that in the last question, but I think that, I mean, there are things that have to have money spent on them and things that need to be prioritized. And then I think there's other things that we need to think about the residents. You know, there's a lot of people that have lived here for a very long time that are older, that are maybe on fixed incomes and things like that. And I think it's important to think about the city as a whole and not just a particular desire of a particular person or group. And I think that we can, you know, continue to grow at a reasonable rate, keep the taxes reasonable, but still get what the city needs to function. And that, I guess that would be how I would look at it. I said, I think that the budget needs to be looked at, you know, and just decide which is the priority and which can be, you know, maybe moved aside, or maybe there can be a reduction in a certain item and, you know, figure out a different way to maybe spend that money or spend less money on that project and move it to somewhere else.
Thank you.
I mean, we had to do that a lot in the towing company because, you know, there could be a need for a new truck, but maybe the new truck wasn't in the budget, but the repair of the truck or getting a used vehicle or something, you know, there might have been an alternative to just running out there and buying a brand new truck because they're very expensive.
Thanks.
Are you ready? City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
Without a, you know, a concrete example, but I would like maybe look at it this way. If there's an emergency thing that has to be done, so something can keep moving along or keep functioning, I would say that would take a priority over something that doesn't need to be done right away. If it's involves roads or sewer systems or, you know, different things like that, safety of the citizens, I guess I would, you know, put that before, you know, something like having a party. I mean, I know that's a weird example, but, you know, I mean, there's things that have to be prioritized and things that don't. And I guess I would want to look at it with my fellow council members and the citizens and kind of figure out, well, is this of dire need or is this something that can wait because we've got an emergency situation or something that is more dire, like a culvert needing to be repaired or something like that. And we would need to spend the money on that versus something else. I hope that answered the question.
Well, so we'd love to ask more questions, but we're going to stick to the 8 for today. And go to that point. So that'll be all the questions that we have for you tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council members.
Thank you for your time. Lexi, you're going to cue the next ones up.
Yep.
And the next person is Sean, is that correct?
Cheryl.
It's Cheryl, is that?
Cheryl, yep.
We don't get to ask the questions this time. Somebody else did first.
Yep. All right, you all ready?
Yeah. Mary, you can see this also.
Initially, I had went for the election November 5th, and I came in third place and wanted to really still pursue it, even though I wasn't elected. I still do that. And I will be doing that in August. Are there any issues you can think of that would be a conflict of interest? For our impact of five, tell us about your experience. Well, my business, the same thing, so that we can succeed. And that's basically what the counties and state and government have to do in order to do well with the money that they get in from the constituents. They have to have a plan. If you don't plan, fail. All right. How important is public engagement in the city decision-making process? How important is public engagement in the city decision-making process? I think it's huge because, you know, it's an elected position. And I think people should have faith in who represents them because that's what we're there for. It's sometimes difficult. People think that, well, they're in there for this position and, you know, they'll help you do this. Well, no, you have to go by the rules. You have to stay by the rules of what.
Better Wi-Fi.
Good.
Yep.
Does that mean we've taken all the bandwidth from our
I
Wi-Fi?
think so. And it's supposed to be high speed.
And I will be doing that. If you don't plan, fail. Now that it's now we can change rules with and you know moderation of council, but and then that goes forward with the Patin. But you know, you have to stay within the realm of the constituents and the rules.
Are we still in question 4 right there?
How important is it to you about your position? To me, you shouldn't be able to just, you have one person that wants something. You shouldn't bend over for just one person. Just because it makes sense or that it would benefit maybe 5 or 10 people. You have to look at it as a whole.
as the city of Nowden. We still want to be rural. People come out here for that. And, you know, somebody wants an apartment complex or some sort of complex where there's multi people wanting, we've had that issue before and we've turned them down because we want it to be rural. This is what we want.
What are your top priorities to accomplish if appointed?
To go along with what the people elected, you know, the council for, to help now then be more rural and to help those people sometimes get what they need for their land ownership and everything. To me, that's kind of huge because I've heard throughout the times that there's been some people that, okay, well, this person got it, how come I can't get it? So, I mean, you have to keep it where it's fair and it's towards the rules, so you can't bend them so much. I also want to try to keep the Met Council out because they don't really know us that well. They just know that they want to spread out. And that's their theory. So that's another big thing that I would like to try to keep out.
All right. How do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
And that's a good one too. To me, you should kind of go towards where if you're going to spend, maybe take from something else. Because I know that in certain instances that some people want a new fire station. They wanted to do this, do that. To me, if it works, don't fix it. It's working just fine with what we have. If something's failing, if something's, you know, deteriorating, that's a different story. If you want to do it just because you want a brighter, newer, you know, shiny, something shiny, I don't think that that is the way to spend the constituents' money.
City council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you choose between them.
Basically common sense and just kind of stick with what then I do already paid there that and there and from thank you. Stick with the what then.
Do you have any last comments that you'd like to share?
Not at this time, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we start?
I don't believe so. No, I appreciate you accommodating me virtually here and apologize for being out of town this week.
Yeah, no problem at all. So let's start with stating your name, just for the record.
Yes, my name is Sean Patin.
Great. And Sean, what inspired you to apply for this city council opening?
Yeah, so I have always had a, I guess, tangential interest in politics a little bit. And I guess as I've matured and kind of gotten to, an adult age now with 2 younger kids, I have an 8-year-old son and an almost 4-year-old daughter at home. And then moving out to now then, I guess it's a unique community in the sense that it has some suburban characteristics, some rural characteristics. And my main motivation, I guess, really is to try to make it a place that myself as one of its residents and its residents can be proud of, and is a place where my kids can flourish and have everything that I'd like them to.
Great. Are there any issues you can think of that would be a conflict of interest for you?
No, truly there shouldn't be, whether work, personal, anything like that. Nothing that I can think of that would come into play at all as a conflict of interest.
Great. City's strategic plan, because our actions have impacts of 5, 10, and even 20 years. Tell us about your experience in strategic planning.
Yeah, so most of my professional career, there has been a pretty significant focus on strategic planning, although not in the public domain. It has been in the private domain across a few different industries. So I have had experience both in manufacturing, services, and then now is kind of a mix of the two, whereas we do provide some services in my current role as well as infrastructure hardware type solutions. And so I guess in all of those capacities, managing teams, building out actually new divisions and parts of organizations, it's taken a lot of strategic planning, both in terms of current year, but where that future state is going to be as well. For instance, in one of my roles, basically I was tasked with starting up a division from zero. Essentially, it was a non-existent division in my marketplace. So I was tasked with basically building out the vision, bringing on a team that kind of saw that same vision and growing that into a successful division, I guess. Sorry, I feel like I'm using division a lot, but a successful program. And I think all of those would apply, although there'd be a learning curve with the public domain and learning about, some of the specifics underlying current budget and revenues and expenditures of the city. I think the skill set that has allowed me to be successful in my professional career would lend itself very well to this position and to be able to allow me to be successful in the role and help move now then in the direction that, I think we all want it to, right? We all want it to become as successful as possible and grow and flourish and be able to really be everything we all dream of.
Awesome. How important is public engagement in the city decision-making process?
I think it's very important. I mean, at the end of the day, the public is really what drives the whole process, not only of the council, but really any political landscape and environment. And so I think without public engagement, you're kind of running blind a little bit. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but I think without them being behind it, without them being a part of the decision-making process, without taking into account as many of those points of view as possible and trying to find a solution that benefits the most people, I think it's kind of a lost cause, right? Because at the end of the day, the goal behind, at least in my opinion, city council should be to position the community to the best interests of its residents and of the community. And I think those go hand in hand, right? To be able to do that, you obviously have to have public engagement and engage them and interact with them and understand what they want and what their desires are, and then ultimately come to a resolution of what might be the closest way to get there, and obviously make as many people happy as possible, knowing that maybe not everyone can be in every single decision.
Great. And how important is it to you to balance your position with the desires of different stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty broad one in some sense. So I guess I think it's maybe related back a little bit to the question I just answered in some format, which is there are many people in the community, obviously all have various stakes in what their interest may be, whether that's personal, professional, business owners, people in political domains, right? There's a lot of interaction within the public domain, especially it kind of crosses really in some context, almost every aspect, whether it's just, like I said, residence and or career type ambitions. And so I think being able to find a balance amongst all those stakeholders is important, right? It's at the end of the day, the decisions you make and the decisions that the council makes, you want to position to benefit as many parties as possible. But again, there is the caveat of not everyone is going to be on the same page with decisions. So it's trying to find the solution that I guess one is potentially where you see the best outcome, but also does satisfy as many potential stakeholders as possible.
And what are your top priorities to accomplish if appointed?
Yeah, I think that I'd probably give a few different answers to that question. So I think one aspect of what I've seen that really seems to be a major focus of the current state of the city, and now then we'll call it, or current strategy and kind of direction, is really trying to balance the budget in some regard, or at least get it trending in that direction. And I know there's a lot of, I'd say, a little bit more community engagement maybe around that overall. And so I think it would be working towards a common sense solution there, something that can really evaluate the full scope of revenues and expenditures, trying to evaluate maybe creative solutions, ways to utilize various technologies, or other approaches to, in some sense, it kind of comes back to the work smarter, not harder, right? Find some maybe low hanging fruit, some opportunity there, but then also dive into some of the other aspects that do require a little bit more deep dive. And again, coming in from the outside, there's going to be a learning curve there. And I certainly foresee that, certainly know it exists. But I think also working with the individual stakeholders, like you mentioned, engaging the public to best understand what is important and how can we drive ourselves to a future where now then can continue to flourish, can continue to grow, can find a balanced budget, and really, I don't know if I'd say lead, maybe that's the wrong word, but I do think now then has a huge appeal in the sense of kind of what I went back to, where it's got this rural suburban mix and it's a very uniquely positioned community in that regard. And I think that also lends itself to a lot of opportunity. So through community engagement and growth and balancing the budget, I think those would be my big things.
And how do you balance the needs of the city when the issue often involves spending?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? It is finding a balance of, you obviously have certain services that are required, and there is certainly a minimum level there, right, of kind of what's expected from the city and what the residents expect. But I think there's a lot of things that will underlie the costs. I know, I've done some minor review of the budget. Obviously, there's not details on some breakdowns and things like that. But I think there is an opportunity to dive into what underlies some of those numbers and continue to get granular with that data to find what I referenced earlier, some of the low hanging fruit, maybe utilize some technological applications, some digital aspects, maybe even moving things to a little bit more digital regard in some aspects, maybe phasing in certain things for the future of where things are headed. Because again, I know one of the challenges too has been population growth. Right now then it's continued to grow, and there are more people and building and all this stuff that do require additional public safety and public services. And so I think it is a balancing act. I guess that's maybe the best way to put it. But I think in terms of how to balance it, I think it's needs versus wants in some regard, and that's what it boils down to. And then prioritizing what really are the needs before any wants are considered, especially while the budget is unbalanced.
And last question here, city council choices often involve multiple competing priorities. Give us one example of how you would choose between them.
Yeah, I think that question probably depends a little bit on the scope, because there's going to be kind of there's a lot of aspects, right? There's obviously a quality or solution aspect of, again, I know it's very broad, so it depends on kind of what you're purchasing. So I don't want to boil it down to something too simple, but like if you were looking at a software solution that the county's using for, let's just say accounting or finance or something along those lines, right? You would want to in my opinion, have a good overview of the two competing products or the multiple competing products to understand the scope of what they offer and what is best suited. But then I think price is a factor. And so I think it depends on if they check all of the needs boxes, going back to the needs versus wants, then I think you can go into price and compare from there. There could be some nice to have features that maybe, and again, this is, I know I boiled it down to maybe something a little simple just as a general template. But I think if you're comparing the features, that gets you across that hump of what the minimums are that you need to get done there, then price can become a factor. And then you do maybe have to consider some alternatives of where is the outlook for the next few years, right? Is there something maybe that isn't a need today and price isn't prohibitive to not consider it, right? That there's a lot of pieces to balance, kind of going back to that. I know all of these decisions are not necessarily always the easiest one, but I think that's where I would start. So it really comes down to, does it check all the boxes of needs? How do they compare on price? If they're potentially within a similar range, then it might be going in to look at, hey, how does this best suit us as a city moving into the future? Does it allow us to continue to grow with it, or are we limited to where we are currently? And again, I know using that example was maybe a simplistic template, but I think it generally overall at least kind of applies to a lot of decisions in that regard.
Awesome. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we sign off here?
I'd just like to say, you know, I certainly appreciate the consideration. I know I've been here and now for about 2.5 years. So a little bit newer resident, but starting to become a little bit more ingrained with the community, and certainly appreciate the consideration, but also the opportunity to just kind of express some of my thoughts and hopefully become a part of the council to continue to move the city of Nowthen in a positive direction and help it grow to where both new and old residents want to see it go.
So that concludes all of our interview process. Again, this would, we'll move on and we'll have some open discussion with our council. Somebody would only be appointed tonight by majority vote. If we are to that spot where we are able to come to a majority vote, then that council member would be immediately sworn in tonight if they are here in attendance. And if we cannot get the majority vote, then we'll come back and convene next Thursday. All right, so let's open it up for any motions or discussion. Councilmember Brian, go ahead. Repeat all that again, please.
Yeah. The challenge I have is making a motion and looking for somebody, appointing somebody tonight is, as we were going through the interviews, I came up with about 10 more questions that that theoretically I'd like to get some sort of answers on before making a decision personally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. As I stated, each member when they were done, I would love to ask more questions, and we're keeping it consistent down to the 8. So yes, I could definitely, it's intriguing to be able to ask more questions. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
I'll just speak for myself then, since nobody's going. I did a rank by criteria on this, so basically a criteria chart. Just given the questions that I had, and I was able to rank the candidates from 1. I did end up having a tie somewhere in there, but it was a little bit lower down. But I was able to rank them, given the information I had, and I would be ready to move forward with the motion with the information we had. So that's for myself.
Mr. Mayor.
It has to go that way. So just do it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Glazer, please go ahead.
That's something that I have yet to do and would appreciate the opportunity the time to be able to do that in order to make a quality decision before moving towards a vote.
Would you recommend to adjourn for tonight then and meet back next Thursday with some additional questions, kind of going in what Councilmember Brian said?
Yes, and you know, with a chance to, if Councilmember Brian would share his questions that he wants to ask, and maybe also consider looking at some of the questions that were asked by the League of Women Voters in the debate that we had. Was it last October, I believe?
Mhm.
So
to not make a decision tonight, that would be a recommendation.
correct, yes.
Councilmember Rainville, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. I thought there were good candidates. I could easily rank them 1 to 6. The problem with asking additional questions is every time,
Mayor, you're on mute.
I shouldn't be. Okay, I'm no longer on mute. Can you hear me now?
Say mute up on the top. We are really good at having audio challenges, audio and video challenges.
I mean, I could call.
Try now, Mary.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I would be able to rank them tonight, 1 to 6. My concern with adding additional questions is that every time you add a question, that can bring up another question. And I think that between what was asked on the application and what was asked of tonight was probably more information that residents have to vote when they go to the polls during a normal election. So I just think asking more questions is going to continue to open up more issues.
So I guess I'll just ask the council, ask you to, Councilmember Glazer's already said that you would like additional time to consider. Councilmember Brian, would you like additional time to consider, or would you like to move forward?
Well, I think we're, going through our little process. It was okay, we were gonna talk for a while, but then we were gonna have a chance to go back and review our notes. And I was taking a lot of notes just personally, so I haven't gone back through all of them to do the ranking. So
Should we, so here's an option, we could look and just say, hey, we can pause the meeting for 20 minutes, or even 30 minutes if that's what we need, to provide enough time to be able to analyze your notes and do a rank criteria. Would that work for you? Again, I want the council to be in a majority vote. We're going through a process we've never done before. So I'm not trying to dictate by any means, I'm just trying to ask.
I'm not sure if 30 minutes would be enough to go through it, to review the interview questions and go back through what was provided and come up with a ranking of 6.
Okay. I think we're gonna just open it up for recommendations then. Would you recommend convening the meeting tonight then? Is that Councilmember Brown?
Adjourning.
Adjourning?
I think that that's what would be most prudent, to go through everything and come up with a recommendation at another time.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a split council on that. And I would, with 2 and 2, I would rather adjourn the meeting, allow you guys the time. We're gonna have to figure out, so Councilmember Rainville, you said, hey, no more questions. Councilmember Brian, you want more questions? We have to come to a conclusion on this, or a consensus on this, on how we were gonna do it.
If Mr. Mayor,
Okay, Councilmember Brian, go ahead.
if we're not going to have more questions, then I'll just have to use the information I have.
Okay, are you okay with doing that? No more questions at this point, and we would use the information we have?
I'd rather not. I'd rather have more questions that they could get into some more detail, but with eight questions, it's kind of hard to make a decision that, in my opinion, when we're trying to appoint somebody to the city council.
Councilmember Glazer, would you like to have additional questions also?
At minimum, I'd like additional time to evaluate the notes that I took for each candidate in order to make the best quality decision for the city. So with, I could forego additional questions, but I would like more time to evaluate.
Okay, so if we did that and just did a motion to say, hey, we would come back next Thursday, no additional questions. I think we could probably get a motion or a majority vote. Again, I'm looking for a majority vote throughout this whole process. I know Councilmember Brian would like to ask additional questions, but it sounds like we could get a majority at least to say, we'll adjourn the meeting for tonight, come back next Thursday, no additional questions, and then we could have a rate criteria chart and we could go from there. So we will not do any voting then tonight then.
Mr. Mayor, on that note, I'd like to ask a question. I had asked this question to Natalie late last week, but we had something arise on a family level where we have to be out of town next Thursday. Okay. Is it possible to move that meeting to Wednesday?
So council members, will you please look and see if we can move it to Wednesday? I'm good to go. I can meet next Wednesday. I've cleared my entire month of March to make sure we can get done with this process. Councilmember Rainville, or would you be open next Wednesday, the 12th?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ryan?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we got consensus. We would move it to Wednesday, the 12th. So if we all please make that adjustment, and we will meet back. We will meet back here. All right, so I guess I'm looking for, I think we've got the majority on this. Will somebody make a motion to adjourn with no additional questions coming into the council packets? That'll give time for everybody to review and deliberate what their decision would be.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. Motion adjournment carries. This will close our meeting for tonight.